Okay, representation. So what for this round, even if this house supports government subject to matchmaking. So without any further ado, I think you could have on the
All right. Like to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. We think this is sort of services is good, individually beneficial in order to have more access to partner this kind of marriage itself. And I think this is community beneficial to tackle the problem, like saving problem of aging society and sustainability of each single local community. More than happy to propose. I want to just clarify a few important things to make sure just everyone won't like run irrelevant assertion on this motion. Firstly, matching services basically mean just like something like matching apps, which, like helping people to get finds and partner, where presumably there's multiple processes to, holding some like phone call, I don't know, this kind of interview or this sort of particular like procedure, and just same as, your most intuitive types of matching services you might experience in the past. And secondly, in terms of government subsidy, I think government have more like careful incentive to choose particular types of services which doing well in the status quo, or like government even like to help or like establishing and funding and running these types of services from the scratch. I don't know, but I think government subsidy tends to be spent quite well and quite like rather well. I think there is much governmental incentive exists to manage this kind of subsidy well. Thirdly, it motion says this is the Asian population. This basically means this happens in the relatively developed states, and I think services that's international, which means the services are open to people from people in the developing country as well. So people call more people from the other country and call them to these types of developed country. And lastly, this is quite important. There is no massive trade-off between other governmental policy to tackle aging population. This is important because for example, giving more labor visa to immigrants in order to secure the labor forces, for example, there is no trade-off because it does not consume massive amount of governmental budget to give 100 more visa to this kind of labor, immigrant labor existing this kind of domestic level. I think these policies are still possible. I don't think these sort of massive scale trade-off can be likely to exist in this debate. Then, first burden, why people more likely to buy into these kind of services? Firstly, people from relatively developing country tends to have more incentive to want to move to developed country for the economic reason, because there are more job opportunity, these types of I think living standard and tends to be high, and working in a developed country secures more better currency, pay in the better currency and a more stable and job protection and those sort of things. And secondly, in general, living standard in these kind of developed country are more safe, and they're more more sanitization, more better public safety, and I think more higher level of quality of living are likely to be secured, even if you are in a blue collar job. And lastly, I think in terms of legislative issue, I think in the acquisition of citizenship gonna be more easier if you get married to someone who already have that sort of citizenship. For example, if you are American, if you're from UK, and in order to get you the Japanese citizenship, it is quite much easier to just apply for the like Japanese foreign embassy, but it is easier to get married with the Japanese person and to legally like recognize as the family of Japanese person. It's much easier to acquire these kind of legal rights. Before we move on, yes, POI closing.
You said like a clinical reason is the most important thing. But how about love? Marriage life is about it.
We don't. That is one mechanism why people buy into this kind of services. I don't say why economic reason is most important. I think love is also important. Yeah. Then why it should be international services, not by just normal matching up like Tinder or something. Firstly, this is if the services is open to international level, there's numerically large size of market available for these types of services, which means that there's more number of people who aiming to come to this kind of developed country, aiming to this kind of get married with people in these kind of like different countries. Secondly, I think domestically in the developed country, this is actually one of the structural reasons why these kind of developed country are getting in the Asian population. There is the culture or like the trend of not getting married or just doing hookup or something or living without partner is something like is raising trend and culture, especially from the Gen Z, like younger people at the current level. I think there is really a significant decline of the rate of the marriage. It's something really like common thing and the existing trend out there. I think if you regarding there are some proportion of like number of people who still want to get married. They're not gonna. They're unlikely to get like married win the domestic level because it's kind of really harsh competition, except because they're like lookers and this sort of particular types of thing. And if they open market to the international level, there's much number of supply to these kind of needs there. And thirdly, I think there is the amount of people who come into this kind of international level are not simply zero sum because as I said before and last week, I think these people are expected to stay longer in this kind of developed country and form family and give birth and contribute to this kind of increase of the population to begin with. And I think this is a good long-term investment in itself. And then, why government subsidy is something necessary? Why we should not rely on the solely rely on private that sort of dating apps, something like that. Firstly, in terms of courier services, I think it is quite important whether or not these services check their people's IDs or like occupation or this kind of annual income or these sort of proper like personal information in order to qualify whether or not these are right candidates to whether or not they are okay or like like suitable person to live in this kind of particular country. And second, in terms of safety and accountability, there's much number of scam matching up services right there, and I think this is these sort of services quite dangerous. And lastly, in terms of prices, I think this should be if there are money injected by the government and in those sort of services, I think that the fees and prices going to be much accessible even from the people in the developing world. I think that can guarantee much higher level of accessibility, which means there are more large number of people likely to come into this kind of developed country. Impact is twofold. One, individual fulfillment to get partner, get married. Second, community level of increase of the labor forces, increase of the population who are young, for fulfilling, wants to be work and be labor in this kind of developed country. I think this is additionally crucial governmental policy to support these types of like matching services. Yeah, OG.
Okay, thank you for us.
Okay, everybody is in this room, so I'm just going to start my speech. I identify myself as a he or him, at least for today. I'm not sure about tomorrow, but yeah, anyway. Okay, I'm going to start my speech soon. In 3, 2, 1. Thank you, Chair. From opening opposition, we are going to run the classic economic case of why we think that government intervention into the market is going to be bad, and if you should do it, it should be only in the time where No other forms. The private market cannot solve a social problem which isn't existing on the government side explanation. We think this is simply a waste of money because government tends to run on an inefficiency basis, and we think there must many more other things that government should do all the time. Now, so basically, I'm going to talk about when the government should intervene and why it doesn't, why you can just leave the private sector do it in this case. Secondly, I'm going to talk about the inefficiency. So first of all, the needs. What did we hear from the opening government? We heard that there are people who want to be married internationally. We want to increase labor forces. I think, first of all, I think there are many other approaches to be taken. For example, if you want if you want to have more labor forces, just invite more people. Ease up the visa criteria. The problem here is that if they are not doing that, it means that they are basically not wanting people to come in because they don't qualify because of the languages or because of their skills or backgrounds, whatever. But now they are inviting them through match-up apps. I just don't know what they're trying to do in this debate. So basically, they feel that there is in terms of the political criteria, some people are failing. But just because you get married to somebody else, it means that there is all this problem that the state deems to may have happened. I'm not sure. Is not going to happen or mitigated. I just don't know what they're trying to do in this case. So in terms of how you want more people to get married, or some people are wanting to get married internationally, first of all, I think if there is a demand so large, I think that there is going to be a lot of investment into this field by private sectors. I think it is actually happening. We think there are international these matching services are actually emerging. They've been they've been funded by investments, well, not necessarily the governmental actors. I think there's going to be a lot of entrepreneurship because you can identify that there is a certain level of market growth in that field. Now, the thing is, I think it is going to be more popular among the younger citizens within developed nations. Firstly, because I think it's the problem of lack of not being able to marry or having a shortage of labor forces is a massive problem exclusive to the younger generation, because the older people probably wouldn't care, but because they are old, they're going to die anyway. But if you're the younger person, you would be serious about it, and you would probably invest in this field because and they would use the services even if it is run by the private sectors. Now, when they told us that yeah, I think the same applies for labor forces or needs, and it just means that there is we just simply deny the problem because they haven't really shown us why there is a social need for the government to invest in this field to actually to make sure that these things are happening. I think it is emerging. It will continue to emerge because of the need that the opening government has told us. Secondly, why do we think this is an inefficient use of money? First of all, I think what did they say? They tell us that no. First of all, I think the government, what they're probably going to do is to invest in a certain company. That company is less likely to be involved in things like to have innovations. They're less likely to reach out for better services to make sure that better people would be married, or there's going to be better probabilities of good matches because of simply the subsidy, especially when there is absolutely when the need is going to be reasonably large, because it means that you can actually expect people to come in the first place. But secondly, even if they don't come in, you can rely on government subsidies. The government subsidies are probably going to be decided by the government. It's going to be a fairly good amount. I think that there is no reason for these people to invest in these kind of innovation and these kind of things. The problem here is that the government is probably not going to stop fundings for a very long time after taking this policy. Now, first of all, I think government's bureaucracy operates on an evaluation system that profits those individuals, the bureaucrats who don't make a change. Why is it? It's because these people are evaluated on no failure basis, meaning that if they do something and fail, that is going to be a bad thing for these people. They will not be promoted. They will not get higher payments. They would be looked down on by other colleagues, saying that you've done something wrong. Now we have to clean up all the mess, and that is probably not going to be welcomed by these people, and therefore they have these small incentive to move and stop that investment from that subsidy from happening. But secondly, if the government suddenly stops subsidies, they're probably probably going to have like these private sectors not voting for the government, meaning that because our government operates on like a short-term election term basis, it means that these people are not going to be scared of cutting the subsidy. Lastly, we think that there is not much transparency, unfortunately, even in developed nations. Look at the fact that when we like the Abe regime invested in creation of like non-woven masks, they wasted so much money. Like they invested billions, and like 90% of it actually went to some random places and you can't trace. The reason why this happens is because people have to be cognitive of every other thing that happens in politics, and you can't actually chase after every incident of government expenditure. It's simply impossible. Every time you try to trace something, what happens is that another sensational thing comes up in the media, and people are distracted. They will not stop questioning. The media doesn't have the incentive to continue because the new thing is going to be much more appealing to the public, and the new things are going to be covered by every other media. Therefore, they go to the new thing. Yes.
That resulted in less support of the government and have the incentive to change, especially looking at the cases that are reported.
No, I just think so. I analyze the government's incentive not to stop. So what that means is that you're going to be to continue subsidizing services which are not innovative, then are not necessarily going to cater to the services, especially even when there is a demand. But lastly, we think that certainly it's better than privately, because we think that if you government subsidize this, they're probably going to ask to prioritize certain like neighboring nations which they have a political incentive to actually invite more than other people. What that means is that you are optimally you are inviting people from some countries at the cost of neglecting other people. What that means is that the customers are going to have a less optimal matchup, even though they might have the better opportunity to go to a private sector and then find the best person to get married to. Now, all these kind of things really lead to the fact that these things are inefficient and not proper services. Lastly, we think it's simply bad for government to invest in this, because you're sending the message to society that marriage is good, but secondly, certain international marriage is good. Obviously, the government probably is going to invest in other forms of advertisement for their services as well, like saying that or like domestic marriages are fashion, is against human rights or whatever, meaning that you jeopardize all these other people living in Japan or in society right now, saying that they are enemies that we should antagonize and therefore we oppose.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So next time we go on different.
Okay. Yeah. So I would like to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. It is not true that the private investors will leave the industry because the nation subsidize in this industry, right? Because the industry itself will be subsidized, and investors think that the industry will rise in the future. For example, like we can see in the EV, like the industry, for example. That's why we are saying that the investors will not be going to other sectors. Rather, they will think that the industry will rise because of the national subsidy. That's why they will come more on our side of the house. But let's move on to other kinds of rebuttals to the opening opposition. The second thing they said is that the waste of money. This is the waste of money. But they also already explained how cost efficient this policy is, right? You don't really have to spend so much amount of money to to create these kind of industry, for example, or motivate investors coming into this kind of industry. I think that the waste of money is not a significant problem. But second thing is that they never explain how efficient they will use money in other fields, right? Like they have to explain that this point more in order to claim this unique benefit, right? But they cannot fiat this point because this is the disaster support motion, right? So I'm going to do probably three things. Firstly, the more characterization of the users and also this policy. Secondly, individual impact, and thirdly, community impact. So other rebuttals are included in my speech. So moving on to some characterizations.
So the first thing is not the uniqueness of national subsidy, right? They say that there is no uniqueness to the national subsidy, but we say that there is, right? The first thing is that the inviting more investors, because then, like, industry, the people think that the reason why the nation is subsidizing this industry is because the nation is thinking that this industry is more important, and they expect further investments. That's why the more people will come in to the industry. But second thing is, probably more importantly, I think we will flip the opening opposition's claim. Opening opposition claim that it's bad that the nation intervene in the market, but it's not true. We think that the overcoming profit incentive of private companies is quite important. For example, like some private companies wants to have rich people to join in like their services, right? For example, inviting people from the European countries or the US, for example, because they will spend more amount of money in this app. But we can invite more people by the national subsidy to the more like the developing countries, for example, like the Asian countries, like the near Japan, for example, which means that like the more like the people in the vulnerable situation will be able to access these kinds of apps. We are saying that this is the point that where national subsidy is necessary in order to overcome the profit incentive of the companies. We're saying that those like the companies will be able to take a risk and then try to like expand their circle, and then tries to apply this to the more developing countries, for example, in the Southeast Asia. So the second characterization is that the characterization of users. So I'm gonna further explain the extent of delta of this debate, right? So there are two actors, right? Domestic users and international users. So for about the domestic users, we think that the more local people will join in this app. Why is the case? Because conventional matching apps, like the other, like the matching apps, they basically, like assumes that the people will meet in person, like at the end of the day. But actually, our app, like the international matching app, is basically like assuming that the people cannot meet each other because they are in the different countries, right? Which means that I think local people have the more incentive and capacity to join these kind of matching apps compared to other matching apps where you cannot meet like the new partners because you are in a distant place, for example, right? We are saying that this is particularly like the influential for local people. But the second character is that the international users. We say that the people from more vulnerable backgrounds will be able to, benefit from this policy. Why it is the case? Opening opposition says like this, policy is not unique, but it's not true for two reasons. Firstly, like the other, policies, like having more, training, workers like from the other countries. It's politically unpopular comparing to the matching apps because some people see like these policies as profiting like only foreign workers, right? Even though like the government is proposing in order to get a long-term benefit of getting like workers, because voters often think that it's just benefiting these foreign workers and they go back to their country and they will not come back. That's why this is politically unpopular compared to the matching up, which basically provides more partners to the Japanese individuals, for example. That's why this will be the more politically popular compared to these things. That's what these things. But second thing is that in their situation where like the nation does not like to subsidize these kind of apps, only privileged individuals are likely to benefit because, as I explained, the market of these apps will not expand from the European or US countries. That's why we're able to benefit these kind of vulnerable individuals. Probably middle income people in some Asian countries, for example, will be able to find partners with the Japanese people, for example. And I will also point out that their alternative, saying that inviting more foreign workers, meaning that the only privileged people will be able to access this, right? There are so few people who can come to Japan. Like the only people who have trained in the university, for example, will be able to get this chance. Compared to that, like the matching app, you will be able to talk to people in the different countries just by having these kind of apps, right? Which means that it would be more accessible on our side of the house. Before we move on,
So if you want to say that vulnerable can use your system, why would the cost be so low when companies don't have to lower the price because of subsidies, and even if customers don't come, they can make a profit?
So we are saying that we can adjust the, like the national budget, like the very flexibly, right? If we can have, more private investors, then we don't really, have to, try to maximize the market by using huge amount of money. But even if we are trying to, make a, expansion, we're basically saying that we are just, try to, apply apps to, just translate some languages in order to, let young people to come in. Meaning that this is pretty cost efficient, right? So we say that the individual impact is quite most important thing in the debate because we're still not sure about the community impact, right? We're saying that the people have stigma now, like not having partners, right? Because it is the aging society and also there's a family pressure to have the partners. And also they have less partnerships because there are less young people, right? Which means that you have less chance to meet with the future partners. We're saying that we will provide these chance and we explain how likely it is, right? There are people who want to come into these kind of aging societies for several reasons. And that's why those people will be able to get the individual benefit. But also they will provide labor to the community, which basically helps the local communities, and that's why we're proud to propose.
Okay, thank you very much. So next I ask you for
Okay. Yes, let's do this meaningless, ineffective policy only if we have infinite amount of money. But unfortunate reality is the government budget is limited and trade-off exists. And while they are wasting a lot of money onto that kind of magical and mysterious policy, maybe the many more productive methodology will not be taken under their side of the house. So I think that, we think that's why we think that given the trade-off clearly exists in this debate, I think that we have this motion must fail. I want to talk about three things in my speech. First of all, let's examine the efficacy of this motion in the first place. But secondly, I want to mention about the clear trade-off and why the effective and productive policy is possible, exclusive on our side of the house. But lastly, I want to talk about the obligation of government and why this motion is totally, bad for that election. Okay, the previous speaker spent a lot of provided many clear analysis about how governmental budget is good, but you will notice that that was partly meaningless at the end of my speech. So move on to the first argumentation about the efficacy of this motion. Let me analyze the context of the aging society. Yes, we shared a problem about lack of children, lack of marriages and couples, things like that. But the thing we disagree from the government bench is the root cause of that problem, because they seem to misunderstand that the current root cause of the current problem of aging society is lack of partner. And if we bring the more partner, suddenly they will get their marriages and the children will suddenly increase. But actually, the root cause is lack of money, lack of time, lack of hope for the future. In the aging society, pension system is severely damaging the young generation and tremendously damaging their life, and also their salary is very cheap, and while the cost of prices are continue to increase, things like that. In the urban areas such as Tokyo or New York, young generations are not afforded to even house or commodity for daily basis. Then that's why the currently people are giving up marriages. They can't feed their partner, they are not afforded to child rearing in that area. So they are very tough only to feed themselves in that reality of the context. Then government said, "Well, I get a cute girl from developing country, present for you," right? Who the hell changed the mindset in that occasion? The lack of money, lack of time won't change. Even if some cute girl from the developing country exists at the front of you, maybe they cannot change their mindset and the money will not come all of a sudden in the first places. That's why we think this motion is partly ineffective things. And even if some people from the developing country come to developed states, maybe the rates of the marriages, child birth rate will not increase. But second problem is that what they have said, they will mainly match with the
people in a developing country. So I think that what they are focusing on is economical perspective. In that cases, I'm so doubtful about the sustainability of that relationship, because maybe developing countries aim is getting money or living in Japan or living in the developed states, which is very, very safety and very, very economically prosper, which means they will opt in this system in order to get married at once with the developed peoples and broke up, because it make easier to get visa in the developed states, things like that. So after they got visa to live in that developed states, they will broke up because their own exclusive aim and purposes are economic, not love or sustainable life in the first place. That's why we think that taking this plan will not have any effectivity for that in order to solve the problem of the aging society. Secondly, let me clarify the clear trade-off existing in the society. As aforementioned, root cause of that aging society is lack of money, lack of time. So in order to alleviate that problem, we have to address to that root cause directly. For example, invest into the corporation in order to increase the salary. For example, provide a support money for child rearing. For example, encourage corporation to provide the parental leaves, things like that. I think that's kind of the direct investment will work. For example, Nishi Akashishi is famous for have a high birth rate. Nishi Akashishi directly supports the child rearing system, publicly supports that kind of direction, and that actually increased the birth rate in that city. And here's the point. Okay, these kind of action are likely to be done by the private sector, because that kind of public support or setting up the infrastructure is sometimes low cost performances. So private sector will not participate in. That's why public sector have to play that role and take that responsibility on outside the house. But the problem is that matching apps is done by the private sector without the public sector intervening in the first place. So I cannot understand the reason why the public sector all the way to participate in the market and waste tons of money in order to create a software system for the matching app. But and also, here's the problem. As I have said, if we spend the money for the right direction, we can succeed in increasing the birth rate, as aforementioned in the case of the Nishiakashi city. But here, while they notice that while they are wasting the money for the very meaningless and mysterious policy, amount of money we can use for that productive policy will continue to decrease on the other side of the house. So I think the outside of the house can provide the more amount of money for the more productive things and in order to solve the problem for the aging society. The problem is they are wasting money and they will not solve the problem and in the other side of the house. That's why we think this motion have no efficacy, but cause a tremendous amount of trade-off. Go.
Do you think this matching app takes up that huge money to the extent to take up all of the other corporate investment or something?
Sure, because creating a software system or as a public system, maybe they have to guarantee the safety things or things like that. I think the management, the corporation management, the security team, management, the software engineering team is too high, so expensive. And I guarantee as a software engineer in an NRI. So lastly, about the obligation of government. Of course, the government is a collective entity selected by the domestic citizens, which means that whom government responsible for is, of course, domestic citizens. They don't have to prioritize the abroad people, the people abroad more than domestic citizens. I think that problem is, as I have said, this motion sacrifices domestic citizens at the expense of the saving the developing people, because they are using the money possible for saving the domestic people to inventing a software system for matching up. We think that this is partly problematic because, as I have said, government have to be responsible for the domestic citizen at first place. Why this argument is very important? This argument is very important because I think, given this principle, even if we take their argument at their best and this policy will work, still this motion should not be taken, because their best case scenario is like some people from the developing country come and get married and sustainable things. But while they're providing the benefit to the developing people, when we are sacrificing the domestic citizen, we are not providing that money to support the child rearing, things like that. That's, at the end of the day, this motion is ridiculously mismatched with the root cause of the problem. Besides, even if that is a good thing, in the best case scenario, wrong way to go as principle. We oppose.
Okay, for the name of the comment.
Starting my speech in 3, 2. All kept on claiming on two things. One, assuming that those apps exist, it's not likely that demand will be created in the counterfactual. And two, pointing out the alternatives that seems to be possible even in the counterfactual, but somehow not being done as an alternative. I'd like to explain my speech. First of all, why those alternatives are not likely to be achieved. Comparatively, why this situation, why this matching apps, international matching apps or something like that, it's more likely to be achieved in terms of the possibility of success in especially focusing on demand. And two, I'd like to talk about justification why it is more likely from the citizens' perspective that this motion will benefit against them compared with any other alternatives. And three, I'd like to talk about like what exactly, if I have time, I'd like to talk about how diversification of citizens is likely to be achievable in our side of the paradigm, how that's likely to benefit the country, and why that's unique to this motion at the end. First of all, about the alternatives. The opening opposition tried to point out several alternatives, for example, immigration or like giving out the money or like investing into other places or something like that. The reason why nothing is being done under the status quo is everything is likely to be inefficient. Talking about immigration, it's likely that looking at the conservative state of Japan and also possibly in terms of Korea as well, South Korea as well, because it's not like a country that is diversified as US or some country like that, then it's likely that like citizens are likely to have hatred against that because they simply don't want to accept those situations. However, the point is, in our world, it's likely to be achieved because our point is the main purpose isn't to maximize or accept the immigrants from the viewpoint of citizens. Rather, the main point of this policy is to give more opportunity for individuals to actually like have the chance of marriage, especially giving more platform and more chances to do that. And believe that it's likely that more citizens are likely to benefit simply from the immigration policy or like something like that, which is too direct, like trickle down is too indirect against citizens, and therefore we believe that it's likely to get individual support, and the backlash is not likely to occur compared to that. Talking about like spreading money, like giving, like investing to higher salary or whatever, we simply believe that that's not likely to connect to like long-term goal of society, which is sustainability, because simply they want to use it or at least save it for themselves, not to give them the child or give them a birth to child. We believe that that's the problem of the alternative and the reason why it's not being done. However, the point that is likely that is unique to the alternative and we still stand on this point. Now, what's the role of the government and why is this motion so unique? We believe there's two things. One, in terms of maximizing the citizens' happiness, especially looking at the form of marriage, and also on the point that focusing on the sustainability of the society, which only the society can achieve it, not the individuals or the companies because they are short-sighted. One by one, first of all, about the about the maximizing individuals' happiness. We believe that will be the justification against citizens, especially the conservative citizens that will hate they hate the tax of themselves being used because it says that it is maximizing the citizens' happiness. Since that marriage is something that is one of the big means of self-actualization, and parents don't tell you to get married, you're about or you're still lonely or whatever, not because they want some conservative norms of family. However, they want your child to have the big self-actualization, big happiness that they experience. With that being said, we believe that it's likely that simply the fact, and also the fact that people are not willingly opting out of the system of marriage under the status quo, they are opting out because of the first choice under the status quo, because they don't have enough facilities and so on to get married with. We can see with this point of this OO that they aren't capable right now. How do we solve this problem in the counterfactual? We believe that the reason why those problem is not being solved under the status quo is simply there's not enough demand. It's because of the fact that there's like more less than this couples that are getting married, then the governments have lesser incentive to invest into those childcare or whatever. However, in the counterfactual, it is like slippery slope that nothing can be achieved in the status quo. However, in the counterfactual, if that was to be solved in terms that even temporarily, if the number of the people is from as an international couple, people who get married, it will increase, and the demand of childcare were to increase, we believe that the situation was likely to change. Although it is a direct solution of that, we believe that's the only solution feasible under the status quo. With that being said, I'd like to explain why, if assuming this existence, why that's likely to demand, directly opposing to all those cases, assuming that there's no demand, and explaining why the situation is likely to change in terms of like
like having more couples. We believe that, as I stated, sure, one reason for that is that they don't have enough enough environment to raise their child, and that cannot be the reason. Cannot be well. It's one reason they cannot marry. We provided you one indirect, however, the achievable solution against this, and moreover, the other reasons, the other factors that exist in the society is that simply they are getting away from the marriage, and also for the point that they are like not willingly opting into those situations, including the fact of matching up as well. The fact that people are not opting into matching up, although it seems to be good, like have good market potential in the future, is because of two reasons. One, we believe that under the status quo, there are no such cases of success in the past, which disincentivizes people to opt in. And two, on the point that since the private industry are not likely to achieve the transparency, it's like not likely that like people are willing to opt into those industry, even like by hearing the cases that like people were deceived or whatever. And three, on the point that companies are also the short-sighted character who have to carry the incentive profit of tomorrow. Therefore, it's not possible for making the long run. We believe that, and especially from the point that this motion making international dating apps or whatever is likely to be long-term investment, is what individual companies with direct short-term sighted the profit incentive cannot achieve. With that being said, we believe that it's only unique for a government to achieve this policy, and the benefit that can be gained is already explained on the point that if we assume that there are certain amounts of people who uses the apps with the lower cost compared with the apps under as well, because it's not that you don't have to and there's also the fact that because of the mismatch of this demand and supply, I mean males are so much more than the female users. With that being said, because the the cost, especially for male, is extremely high. Those situations likely to be solved if more and more people opt into those apps and have balanced value at the end. Team opposition talked about that's not benefit against citizens because they'll get out of those states at the end. However, looking at the fact that international marriage is likely to be long-term relationship, much more than domestic relationship under a status quo, we believe that that's not likely to happen. And moreover, at the end, we believe that will destroy the humans the concept that will first develop countries like Japan and South Korea to make people opt into the nation, and we believe that that's likely to achieve diversification, not like the status quo where people are too conservative to have the mindset that they want to kick other foreigner out. However, because of this motion, we believe that that's going to be beneficial, and for all these reasons, we're happy to propose. Thank you.
라이브 스트리밍. 우리끼리 토이레行ってるの流れてるんですか Got it. Got it. 지금 이름이야. 네. Okay. Okay, my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. The problem of opening opposition is that they do not engage to the best case of opening government, right? Yes, the population might increase, but we think that even in that kind of case, we think that is rather harmful and counterproductive. This is the stance from the closing opposition. So the opening opposition is talking about some micro issue about the management, or it is not the effective way, so they have little substantial. So based on that, we have two things. First of all, I like to engage to the government side entirely about the harm for the Asian society. So we think the population drain will occur in our side. And second of all, I like to explain about the harm for developing countries if I have time, because we are talking about the poor people, who are the most vulnerable people in developing countries. I like to explain one by one. Okay, so before that, some rebuttal to the previous. No. The government side entirely. So opening government and closing government is based on one premise: the population will increase. This is why people will become happy, right? In terms of the labor increase from the opening government, in terms of the education, the child caring from the closing government. So we think that the premise that the population will somehow increase, but there's no neutralization from their side, right? Because from the beginning, they say that they will make a platform by the subsidization of government, but they do not do anything, right? Because we have a language barrier or a cultural barrier, many kind of difficulty exists, but they haven't explained why this kind of thing can be overcome by their proposal, right? So we think there's lack of explanation from the beginning. Second of all, we think that can be only for the rich people, right? Because the people who are incentivized to marry in this kind of situation, especially for with the people who are coming from the developing country requiring the money, is of course the rich people, right? So they are capable to take care of these kind of people in developing country, and they can earn for this kind of poor people, and they take care of the cultural difference or some language barrier like that. These kind of people who are privileged is the only person who are incentivized to marry in that kind of platform. So we think they're talking about really minor kind of case and minor kind of number, right? Second of all, we think there can be a fraud, right? Because there are people who are requiring money from the developing country. There are increasing number of cases that developing countries people require money by divorcing them, by doing ishario in Japanese or like that, right? So we think the fraud case can happen. So we think it is not unfortunately a really happy case. And second of all, within the divorce case will increase, right? In that kind of case, because comparatively speaking, within the international marriage, it has lots of difficulty, right? As I said, the language barrier, cultural barrier. According to my partner, marrying life is so difficult. So even in the domestic sphere, in the same culture, it is really difficult, and they can have a quarrel. But they cannot have a communication in the language barrier, and they have a cultural difference, right? On this situation, that it can be really hard situation for them. So within divorcing case can happen. So this is based on the opening government case, because yes, maybe the marrying people can increase. Even on that case, we think that divorce case will increase, and there's no population increase, right? So the mechanization there has lots of lack of explanation. Okay, this is a rebuttal to the previous speaker on the government side, and I'd like to move on to my argument about the population drain. So the population drain will occur based on this characterization of people who will use this platform. A, we think these kind of people who use this platform is well-educated person, likely to be a well-educated person, right? Because they feel less cultural barrier, less language barrier, because they may have the experience to go abroad to study, or they have lots of opportunity to learn English. They have lots of opportunity to interact with people in the global sphere. This is why maybe the main character of these kind of people who are gonna marry to that kind of in the international marrying is a person who are globally minded person, right? So on second of all, B, they are rich enough to think of marrying someone, especially in the case of opening government. They are thinking of marrying with the poor people, right? So they can earn for these kind of people. So we think that the well-educated and rich people who are globally minded person, it will be the people. What is the implication here? Is that these kind of people are likely to be capable to move to other country and to think of the future in foreign country, right? They can be accustomed to that. This is the characterization we see people. And the contextualization here is the Asian population. What is the
what kind of feature is there? Two things. First of all, these kind of country prioritizing the elderly people, right? In the democratic society, of course, if there's increasing number of elderly people, they try to prioritize the elderly people, right? For example, about the pension system, the young people have much burden, or about the children education, maybe the budget is decreasing and decreasing. On this situation, maybe young people do not want to live in that kind of country. It is a likely scenario, right? Second of all, economy can be shrinking, or at least the narrative that economy is shrinking is strong, right? So there's a labor decreasing, as the opening comment said, or there may be some like the exploitation of young people. The burden of labor is increasing for young people like that. So we think that there are people who do not want to live in that country because of two reasons. So we think their capability is to move to other country, and they have incentive to move to other country, right? So the situation is the population drain. Why? So on this kind of situation, they can think of going to Thailand, for example, by marrying with the Thai people, because they can use their like the money, and maybe they can use the currency in developed country, and they can have a luxury life in the developing country. Or they might likely to go to the developed country, like for example, marrying with United States person or like that. As opening them and said, because we are high likely to go to the developed country, right? More developed country. So on the, even if we buy the mechanism from the government side, we think that they will go to this kind of country, and we think that is really a harmful situation. Why is that? We think that this is really important thing for two reasons. First of all, that can be a brain drain, right? Not only the population drain, because we are, as we told you, the rich, well-educated, skillful person will go to this kind of country, and we think that is a brain drain. No, thank you, sorry. And we think that is a flip to the government side, because even if we buy all kinds of mechanization from the opening government, we still win the debate because it is totally counterproductive. Third of all, we think we are winning the opening opposition because we are not on the best case of opening government, we are on the best case of the opening government, right? Okay, so lastly, I like to talk about the developing countries. So as we said in the POI, we think they are marrying not only because of the love, right? But because of the money. So they may be they are based on the monetary incentive, so they cannot be happy. And second of all, of course, they are based so there might be some domestic violence program or divorce program, right? On this situation, they are alone in that kind of country because they are alone in that sphere, and they have a different culture, different language, right? So they cannot go for the help. This is why we are very proud to propose.
Okay, before that, the clarity press on the government. Take care.
Okay. はい。すみません。いただきます。はい。はい。ちょっと待ってください。あ、すいません。はい。いきます。 I'm gonna start with 8. I think problem of opposition side is that they don't understand the system of the matching app or like the status quo like of those kind of apps in the first place. I think like because of the because like demand and supply is not matching in the status quo, I think a lot of people are not cannot like the government cannot utilize this as an opportunity to increase the number of immigrants, etc. But anyway, so more importantly, because of this, like individuals cannot achieve self-actualizations in our side of the house. But in our side of house, because we are going to subsidize those kind of apps, and meaning that first of all, because like the fact that government is subsidizing some kind of application, like some companies, meaning that like citizens are more likely to be able to feel safety of using those kind of apps in the first place. But second of all, because we are going to subsidize, and like those kind of companies are more likely to be able to provide better systems, like with like to lower the risk, and meaning that like the number of people who are going to use like those kind of apps will increase, right? And meaning like individuals like are more and more likely to opt into those kind of apps, and that's gonna increase like individuals' choices in our side of the house. Anyway, so let's talk about our engagement, our contribution first, and I'm gonna engage each side of the house after that. So first of all, the contribution we made is two things. First of all, like we have showed that like alternatives provided by OO is impossible. First of all, we told you, like immigration is impossible, right? Like they never explain why, try to accepting immigration is possible in the first place. But like, I think the reason why like immigration is not accepted is because of the culture or something like that. And in that case, I could understand like why those kind of alternatives were likely to to work in the first place. But second of all, like they said, like they can hire the salary or something like that, and we showed you that it's gonna be impossible. Like it's gonna cost more, right? Like in the long term, like government have to pay a lot of money for like those kind of individuals, meaning that they're likely to waste their money. I'm gonna talk about like more later, but anyway. The second thing what we have told in this debate is that like why like it's better for the citizens, right? I think in our house it's much better for individuals' happiness, right? I think in the status quo, people have to choose their partner like within the community, or like very limited amount of people, right? I think in that case, like first of all, like they're likely to have not be able to have the happiest life, like although like they have like more choices like in our house. Well, we think that's simply bad, and citizens not only like practically, but we think citizens have like a right to like have the best options in our side of the house. But anyway, so I'm gonna like compare to each side of the house. I think please, I think we have overridden on first of all comparison with OG. I think we have overridden OG in two ways. First of all, the certainty of the impact, right? I think we are unsure. Like I think what OG have said is like they're likely to increase the population or something like that. But first of all, I think it's very unsure, like if the like number of immigrants increase or not. Like as OO have mentioned, I think that's a very unlikely case, since the like we are under culture like the kind of like marriage is not kind of encouraged because of thanks to some women or something like that. And in that case, I could understand like the impact, like the certainty of the impact in the first place. The inner side, like what we have showed is the individual, like the individual choice will be like will be maintained, right? I think that it's like because like simply like we can increase the choices for like each individual, meaning that like we have like more certain impact. The second reason like why we have the second reason we have overridden OG is like we could engage to the alternative of the O, right? I couldn't understand. I don't think like OG have like could have engaged to the O's case, which is like immigration, like accept more immigrants if it's possible, like higher wages possible, something like that. And then no later, please. Without opposing them, or like without like showing like that's not gonna be the case, I don't think government cannot win this debate. But we did it, so we're gonna override OG. But anyway, I'm gonna move on to the engagement to O. So I think they have told in this debate multiple stuff. First of all, I think they said like it's gonna waste of money or something like that for government. First of all, I couldn't understand like why like those like in their side house it's possible or like it's likely to allocate more money for like the poor or something like that, right? I think like they're like more like wasted money in the status quo, but like government is not actually allocating for some money for those kind of poor. And I couldn't understand like why in their side of the house government is likely to allocate those kind of money for those people. The second of all, I think it's still possible to help those kind of poor in the status quo, right? Probably like the amount of money like subsidy government is allocated for this kind of company will be like at maximum probably 3% or something like that. And in that case, we can still help like a lot of people in this side of the house. But more importantly, thirdly, I think in the long term, it's going to cost more like for the government, right? I think meaning that that's going to be more, government needs more and more budget in the long term. What opposition side is trying to do is like pay more money for like poor in the long term, like who cannot get job or like who and then simply give more wages or something like that, right? Like government has to continuously pay more money, but like, you know, like the number of people is decreasing, meaning that like needs for like products or like the number of people who consume products is decreasing in the country. And in the long term, like the economy is likely to collapse. Not like collapse, but like become like worse and worse in their house. And in that case, like government have to like without the chance of increasing the number of population, like government have to continuously pay a lot of money for those kind of people. I think in the long term, that's going to be the worst situation. A final engagement to CEO. I think what they have said is that well-educated people will likely to go to other countries after they divorce or something like that. First of all, I think like those kind of people are likely to remain in the country, developed countries, simply because like those kind of like development in developed country is super great, right? Great, right? For example, I think like the life in Japan is much better than the life in, for example, I'm not sure, but like Vietnam or like some like African countries. In that case, simply those kind of people are likely to remain in the countries. But second of all, I think also for like kids, right? It's better to live in the stable, developed countries for their future. And in that case, those kind of people are likely to remain in the countries. But thirdly, even if like all the cases true, I think like in Nurse House, at least like we can give more opportunity for individuals to choose like their partner, like from the maximum choices. And I think it's the best. That's why we are proud to.
Okay, thank you for your speech. So finally, I will speak on the screen.